Good morning, everybody. It is CJ Powers. That's me. And today I am going to be your host for CJ's Corner. Why? Because this comes from my corner of the world. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I actually am going to share with you something that is kind of exciting. We're going to go through the steps of creating flash fiction. That's right. Sometimes when you want to learn how to tell a story, you do it from the standpoint of different structural components. You can tell a story through poetry. You can tell a story through a novel. You can do it through a campfire story. There's lots of ways of doing it. Today, we're going to go over flash fiction. In this case, writing a complete story within 500 words. So, let's get started. Well, that was interesting. That wasn't supposed to happen that way. Welcome back. I was just about to put together the a connection that I need to be able to share a flash fiction story with you. And I accidentally hit the button and it took you out of the intro and brought you right here. So let's see if I can't get us connected here to get us started. Hopefully. Yeah, it's not showing up. Well, this might be a very interesting show. All right, let's see if this works. There we go. We have it now. So I'm starting off with a story called The Spectacle of a Husband. Now, the key here to The Spectacle of a Husband is that I've done it in a way where, how should I say this? I'm going to first read it to you, and you can read along, and then we're going to go over the story and break it down as far as what it is, what has happened. And I think I have it large enough that you can read along with me. Let me make it just a little bit bigger. Daniela watched in horror as one of the ropes snapped from her husband's antique trapeze, forcing her to ponder life without abuse, if she doesn't save the bastard. The crowd under the big top shrieked when the artist's hand slipped to the end of the white rope. 2 spotlights locked on Alejandro, dangling 40 feet above the center ring. 2 more spotlights angled on the floor where they had disconnected the safety net. The ringmaster signaled the clowns to grab the net and hold it taut to lessen Alejandro's fall. I guess it's not going to work too well with me moving this around. Let's go back here. All right. To lessen Alejandro's impact of hitting the sawdust-covered concrete floor. In the stands, frightened children were turned from the attraction, but some felt compelled to watch the acrobatic's demise. A few mothers took their children outside. Daniela scanned the area for a solution, needing to demonstrate an attempt to save him and avoid being frowned upon. She wondered if an elephant's back might spare him from splattering on the ground. She hustled to the elephant trainer, who shook his head. The clowns got tangled in the stretchy net and drew nervous laughter from the bleachers. Daniela jogged out back to the lion tamer and suggested rolling the parade cage under the trapeze. He pointed across the midway where the broken wheel was propped up next to the timbers, keeping the cage level. Daniela jogged back to the big top. Alejandro was still dangling above. She glared at her abuser, but compassion washed over her. Staying true to herself, she jogged backstage to look for a solution. She stopped next to a water cooler and grinned. "Ladies and gentlemen," shouted the ringmaster, "welcome to the center ring. Daniela, the strongest woman in the world." The confused crowd gave a smattering of applause. Daniela walked in holding a small paper cup with water splashing over its edges. Silence fell over the big top. The great Alejandro will perform his new death-defying high diving act from a height of 40 feet and land in the water held by the strongest woman in the world. Daniela encircled the point underneath Alejandro. She lifted the water cup high and signaled she was ready. Alejandro rotated his body to see the expression on every face before letting go. This would be the greatest feat in circus history, or make headlines as the dumbest stunt resulting in death. He was ready. Releasing his grip, Alejandro fell like a dagger headed toward his wife. Alejandro snapped his body horizontally. His back hit the cup of water. Daniela swung her arms, squatted, and released, sending Alejandro sideways across the floor. His feet hit the center ring, popped him upright, and his hands high in the air. He received a great ovation and bowed. Alejandro extended his hand to his wife for a second bow. She took his hand in hers and bowed. It felt like their years earlier, with her heart filled with hope. The circus sold out the next day when the newspaper headlines read "Strong Woman and Acrobat Astound All." All right, well, aside from the fact that I had to clear my throat a couple times, I'm sorry about that. I should have had a thing of water to drink. Let's talk now about how we're going to put this together, how we're going to make this show work and be successful. Now I say show because every time I do any kind of story, I see it as a show. Because first of all, you have to entertain. There has to be some form of entertainment. Otherwise, it doesn't work as a show. Second of all, you have to visualize things as best as possible so people can actually see it in their mind's eye. And that's why I talk about it as being a show. So show is very, very important. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up these words again. See if I can make it a little bit bigger. And I'll put it off to the side here. If I can. Okay, that's about as large as I can do. So I'll have to, as we go through this, I will have to just kind of zoom in here. There we go. So your opening sentence, the key is that you have to grab the people's attention, and you have to do it in a way where not only are they captivated, but they want to know more. So here in the very first sentence, you can see I say, Daniela watched in horror. I mean, we're not even to the first sentence yet, and you know something is happening. If you're intrigued, you have to read the next line, the next part of the same sentence, but it's on the next line in the text I'm using. So Daniela watched in horror as one of the ropes snapped. Okay, now you know why there's horror. Something dangerous is happening. Snapped from her husband's antique trapeze. So here's something interesting. In the first sentence, not only am I grabbing your attention, I'm giving you the danger, and I'm giving you some background. This is a trapeze artist situation. You don't know the setting yet, but you're about to. But you know someone's dangling from a trapeze. That automatically gives you high level of footage. It gives you all kinds of things that you have to consider and think, oh my gosh, what's happening here? This is when I move into the character of Daniela, forcing her to ponder life without abuse. All right, now here you go. Now you understand that she is being abused by the person dangling from the rope. What is she going to do? You have a universal question that is causing people to have to know the rest of the story. And I throw in a side comment, if she doesn't save the bastard. So here's the thing. There is a possibility that instead of walking away from abuse, she's going to save her abuser and maybe put herself right back into that same danger point that she's been in for some time. There is plenty in this first sentence. This is only one sentence. In the first sentence, to give the reader an idea of what's going on. Now, keep in mind with flash fiction, it's really important to do as much as you can in the first couple sentences to really grab hold of the audience. Now, in this case, I managed to pull it off in one sentence. The reason is in flash fiction, you're usually limited to either 500 words or 1,000 words. In this case, the competition I was working with was 500 words. Now, when you do something that quick, it means that every word counts. That's right, every single word counts. And if every word counts, you have to understand that once you rough out your story, you have to go back and polish and polish and polish until you get it, so there are no wasted words. That's right. You have to cut out all the junk and make sure that the only thing that is coming through is what you want the audience to know. Okay, so let's go back and look at the story again. Now, the next sentence, the crowd under the big top shrieked. Okay, now here we go. Now we're getting our setting. We already have the mood, because the mood is telling us there's danger. And now we're telling it, the people, the audience, that the people in the circus area under the big top are shrieking. That means something devastating is happening, which is just reinforcing the first sentence. And it's helping the people now to visualize, oh, this isn't a big top. And it's so devastating, the audience is shrieking. They don't know what to do. So the crowd under the big top shrieked when the artist's hand slipped. There we are telling the audience, imminent danger. It's going to happen. He is not going to stay up there all day. He's coming down. That creates more of a anxious type feel. His hand slipped to the end of the white rope. Now, here's an interesting twist. I said white rope. I could have said, torn and tattered rope, or, worn out rope. But no, I was trying to give you a sense of the fact that it was still pristine. Now, some people are going to question, why is that breaking? Did somebody interfere with the rope? Did they pre-cut the rope? What is happening? Now, because it's flash fiction, I only have 500 words, so I did not explore that. But I just wanted the audience to kind of wonder, what's really going on here? Because again, I needed a reminder in the second sentence that he's an abuser and there's someone down below that has been abused. So once we got all that information out, I moved to the third sentence. 2 spotlights lock onto Alejandro, dangling 40 feet above the center ring. So the spotlights is all about show business. It's all about lighting up someone who is probably a narcissist if he's also an abuser. It's putting him in the limelight. I'm trying to make sure that everything around him is reflecting who he is. And I'm reminding people it's dangerous. It's 40 feet up. No one's going to survive that kind of fall. Maybe they could. Maybe just some broken legs. But 40 feet, that's quite a drop. 2 more spotlights angled on the floor where the disconnected safety net lay. Now, here's something interesting. The reason I went with this is because I wanted to show that in his arrogance, he decided to do his trick without the safety net. Now, this is at the big top where there's children, and we know that because of the first sentence. Why would you risk your life in front of children? This guy is just going for the glory. And every sentence so far has helped to provide that information. Next, we move on. The ringmaster signaled the clowns to grab the net and hold it taut to lessen Alejandro's impact of hitting the sawdust-covered concrete floor. So I'm saying concrete floor. I'm going to say, folks, this guy's about to splat. But here's something interesting. Who is trying to reestablish the safety or to at least lessen the fall? It's the clowns. That's right. It's the clowns. It's the guys that can't get things to work right, who stumble and fumble around. Have you ever been in a situation where you're sitting there wondering to yourself, do I really want to see that person succeed? You know, we're talking about a narcissist here. Do we want to see him succeed? Let's not help so much. That's the kind of attitude I wanted to bring across with the clown. I wanted to make sure that the audience knew that this thing was just going to be a nightmare. And maybe on purpose. Maybe there's several people that know he's an abuser and they just don't want to help him. Okay. In the stands, frightened children were turned from the attraction, but some felt compelled to watch the acrobat's demise. Have you ever been in that position in life where you see someone headed toward the edge of the cliff, someone that has been abusive, has been a terrible person, and there's just something about it where you just want to see that he gets his just desserts? Now, when we look at that, we know the humanity of it says that's a shameful position to be in. And yet there's something about the humanity of mankind where we always want to see justice. The funny thing is, with the narcissist, rarely do you see justice. Pretty much, you spend all your energy and time just getting away from that situation. And yet, the character Daniela is staying right there in the middle of it all. And she's considering whether or not she should save him. But here's the thing. If you remember correctly, she was considering whether or not she should save him based on how it looked on her. So she at least started to think about self-preservation at that point. Let's move on with the story. Okay. Let's move it up here. Daniela scanned. Oh, wait. A few mothers took their children outside. Yeah, we did that. Okay. Daniela scanned the area for a solution, needing to demonstrate an attempt to save him and avoid being frowned upon. So that's what I was just talking about. You know, have you ever been in a situation where you wanted to do things so that you saved face? But then again, here's something interesting. Just about everyone knows this guy's an abuser, and just about everyone is almost relieved knowing he's about to drop to his death. Do you really need to be concerned about what people think of you? It's a good question, but it's a human part of the human condition, so addressing it in the story is an important thing. Now, I don't stay there. I have her decide to actually be who she is and act according to who she is instead of responding to who he is and what he's doing, which is a very important step for a person to walk away from a narcissist. You first have to stop seeing life from their perspective, and you have to start seeing it from who you are. So she starts to contemplate. She wondered if an elephant's back might spare him from the fall, from splattering on the ground. She hustled to the elephant trainer, who shook his head. So he's like, no, dude, it ain't gonna happen. Now, part of that probably was him being kind to make sure that she, started looking for a different solution. Because by the time you get the elephant ready, get him out of the cage, get him walked into the big time, well, you understand. The odds are he couldn't have done anything fast enough with an elephant to be of help. So we check back in with the clowns, who have the probable safety net. So her first attempt number one to get the elephants to save the day wasn't going to work. So we check back in to see how the clowns are doing. And they got tangled in the stretchy net and drew nervous laughter from the bleachers. Some people were thinking, gee, maybe this is still part of the show. Daniela jogged out back to the lion tamer and suggested rolling the parade cage underneath the trapeze. He pointed across the midway where the broken wheel was propped up next to the timbers keeping the cage level. In other words, this solution is going to take even longer. It's not going to work. So now she's got 2 strikes on her. What is she going to do at this point? So she's going to double check, jog back in, find out what's going on, reassess the situation. Daniela jogged back to the big top. Alejandro was still dangling above. She glared at her abuser. So when she got there and saw him and he's still alive, he's still kicking, that's when she had to deal with who he is based on who she was. And suddenly, compassion washes over her. Suddenly, the story is about what's in her heart, not who he is. Very important thing. This is basically what I call the twist in the plot. This is the point where you are headed one direction and suddenly we now realize, wait a second, this story can go a different way. Our lives are faced that way with that situation all the time, where we find out that as we're progressing forward and we're coming upon a wall or a cliff, we realize, you know what? I have a decision to make. I can either keep on going off the cliff or stop. But there's yet another decision. We can turn and go a different way. And that's when you have that twist, an unexpected change. And in this case, it's Daniela making a decision to follow her heart based on who she is. So compassion washed over her, staying true to herself. Okay, I'm not going to make decisions based on him anymore. Now I'm going to make decisions based on me. She jogged backstage to look for a solution. Now, keep in mind, all solutions during a circus are backstage somewhere. So she's going right back to the source where a possible solution resides. She stopped next to the water cooler and grinned. Pew! The light bulb hit. She got an idea. Now, the audience doesn't know what that idea is yet. And they can tell, though, that it's something unique. Why? Because all I did was say she grinned. Now, was the grin because she knew she could save him? Or was the grin still that humanity inside of her wanting him to see his demise? And this might put her in the clear while at the same time allowing him to check out? We don't know that for sure. And that's because I wanted it to just be a lingering question. I wanted the audience to be like, what's about to happen? Why? Because we're halfway through the story, a little bit more than halfway through the story now. We're coming upon the climax. And as a result, we want the audience one more time to question, what is it that's about to happen, so that they need to pay closer attention to the story and figure it out. That's the key. Making sure that the audience is interacting with the story. They need to figure it out. All right, back to the story here. All right, so she grinned. Let's get this back over here. Now this is when the ringmaster joins in. So obviously some time has elapsed. She has talked to the ringmaster and said, hey, introduce this next bit. Here's what's going to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, shouted the ringmaster, welcome to the center ring. Daniela, the strongest woman in the world. And in she walks, right? But now we're not putting our attention on her in this story. We're putting our attention back on the audience. Why? Because we can learn more about a character sometimes by watching how others respond and react. And here's how they're reacting. The confused crowd gave a smattering of applause. That's right. It's like, they didn't know how to deal with it. Why? Well, we're about to find out. Daniela walked in holding a small paper cup with water splashing over its edges. Okay, now we know this is absurd. Somehow that's going to save the day. A little paper cup or a little styrofoam cup, whatever kind of cup it was with water splashing over. And yet she's going directly toward him. So they're like, oh my gosh, does she know something we don't know? What is going on? So silence fell under the big top. I find that to be one of those things where it's like, okay, do you have the reader at the place now where they need to know the answer? The answer is yes, we do have him in that spot. The great Alejandro will perform his new death-defying high diving act from a height of 40 feet and land in the water held by the strongest woman in the world. Okay, that's the ringmaster shouting again. Now keep in mind, the ringmaster has been kind of employed by Daniela to set this thing up. So it is now going to be either a spectacular disaster or a spectacular save. And we don't know which it's going to be yet. We don't know what her choice was. But we know that the ringmaster trusts her enough to go forward and to just give it all he's got. And he's turning it into a spectacle. And since the husband, it's called the spectacle of a husband, right? Since he is a narcissist and loves being in the limelight, this is all up his alley. And it is being played up big. And interestingly enough, what's happening here is that the story doesn't change. It continues moving forward, but what has changed is that Alejandro is going to go along with it. He's not going to shout, no, that's silly, that's stupid, get a rope, get a ladder, get something. No, instead he's like, I'm going to land in a paper cup of water. As if that's a thing. Wow, what is he thinking? Is he that self-centered? Is he that show-oriented to get the praise and applause of others that he's going to go along with this? Well, he is. All right. Daniela encircled the point underneath Alejandro. She lifted the water cup high and signaled she was ready. So Alejandro rotated his body to see the expression on every face before letting go. This guy wanted to soak it in. This is going to be a moment. This would be the greatest feat in circus history, or make headlines as the dumbest stunt resulting in death. But notice this next sentence. He was ready. Interesting. She decides she's going to live according to her compassion and who she is. And he can trust that. This is a guy that's been abusing her for a long time. And yet when he sees that she is who she is or does what she does because of who she is, he can trust that. Isn't that an interesting twist? When you're looking through a story of this nature and you're seeing how the characterization's unfolding, there is so much depth that's going on in this story. And yet, frankly, 80% of the people reading through the story just read the action of it all. And they don't think through the whys behind every one of these steps. But you'll notice in flash fiction, almost every sentence has a very important reason for being in the story. Because in flash fiction, you have to cram everything down into very precise language. It's a very difficult task. It takes hours and hours and hours to bring in that kind of focus. Especially knowing that 80% of your audience just isn't going to catch all these intertwined pieces of information. So you ask yourself, why do we take the time to put all that in then? Because what it does do, every person receives the fullness of the story, whether or not they can directly understand all aspects of the story. And that fullness makes people feel like, wow, this is a really good story. That's why we do it. Okay, let's continue on. All right. Releasing his grip, Alejandro fell like a dagger headed toward his wife. That was just done to remind people that this guy is an abuser headed toward the one he abuses. And now he's coming right after her. Or right at her. Because he's dropping. But I let the sentence stand just as a reminder only. Because I don't want to spend too much time on who he is. I want to move right away to who she is. Because she decided to make the decision based on who she was this time. So I transition by having him, Alejandro, snapped his body horizontally. His back hit the cup of water. So we know his aim was right. She had the cup above her head. We know that if she doesn't move and do something, she's about to be landed upon. Ouch. Well, Daniela swung her arms, squatted, and released, sending Alejandro sideways across the floor. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen anyone do squats and having something above their head when they're doing it, it's remarkable because you know the tremendous amount of strength it takes to do that. And you have to have done those moves before, otherwise your body would not respond properly. So this is a woman who has taken everything that she has developed and she's putting it to use to save her husband. And he slides across the floor sideways. His feet hit the center ring, popped him upright with his hands high in the air. So the momentum and the force was tremendous. He received a great ovation and bowed. In other words, this guy, he lands like this and he's like, and everyone's cheering. And instead of him being like, oh, thank God I lived. Thank you, my wife. Thank you. Thank you. No, instead it's like, yes, I am the greatest of all. Right back to his narcissism. Isn't that amazing? But that's what they do. Alejandro extended his hand to his wife for a second bow. Now, here again, she has a choice to make. She took his hand in hers and bowed. It felt like their early years with her heart filled with hope. Now, this is a really important thing because the people that are diving into the humanity of this story and our human nature are going to realize that every time something desperately or dramatically separates us from a loved one who's a narcissist, there's something about the narcissist that tries to draw them back in, and they are drawn back in because of false hope. The reality is Daniela's life isn't going to change, but yet she's letting him back in because she now has hope again, but it's a false hope. So you see, this story is very heavily laden with the real aspects of a narcissist. Okay, let's go back to the last part of the story. Here's the outcome. The circus sold out the next day when the newspaper headlines read, "Strong Woman and Acrobat Astound All." Well, you know what? They did astound all, because every one of us, when we see a surrendered person go back to her narcissistic spouse, we hate that. We are astounded that she can actually go back. There was a time when I was helping a bunch of people that were going through divorce. And I remember one woman who had the police show up to save her because her husband took a butcher knife and started swinging it at her and sliced her arm. And I mean, it was a brutal, blood was all over the kitchen. It was just a terrible situation. And I remember when she was so thankful she could go back home and that he was going to be okay. I told her, don't go back home. He's not okay. She didn't believe me. So I decided to be bold. I said, listen, if within the next 10 days you need help, call me. I will get you out of there. 6 days later, the phone rang. There's something that happens with the narcissist that causes people to somehow think that they are now going to change. Oh, they didn't. Oh, but now they're going to change. Oh, not this time either. Oh, well, now no, you know what? You can't change them. They're choosing not to change. I mean, here's Alejandro hanging from a death-facing issue, and he chooses to pump up his chest because of it. Oh, yeah, I did this incredible feat. He didn't change at all. If my life had been threatened like that, and a woman had saved my life, I would have a tendency to be incredibly thankful. And the gratitude might even make me a generous person toward that person. So, with flash fiction, when we're talking about a story situation like this, we're talking about the fact that you have to take all of this story, not only the visual action stuff that everyone can easily see and understand, but everything that goes into the building of the characters, and it becomes a very impactful story. Yes, 80% of the people are going to miss all that extra stuff that was put in, but they'll still enjoy the story because there's a fullness that comes from our choice of building the story in that way. And that fullness is something that Pixar does with every one of their feature films. You might be missing a lot of stuff in some of the Pixar films, but overall you're like, wow, this is a good movie. You're not quite sure why if you've missed all those things, but you still know it's a really good movie. And for those that catch all of those things, wow, what an incredible story. And tendencies are that when we find a book where we actually catch all those nuances, or a film that we watch and we pick up on all those nuances, we tend to make those one of our top 10 favorites of all time. Why? It's because we actually were focused enough to catch all those nuances, and it's the nuances that make the films work well, or the novel read like something you want to read a second time. So that's what we do when it comes to flash fiction. Sorry, I have to clear my throat so much today. But I hope you enjoyed going through flash fiction and how it's structured. Keep in mind, you got to grab the attention right up front. You got to have a middle point that kind of gives you a twist and sends the story a different direction. You need to lead something up to a big climatic moment. And then, as you saw, the conclusion was just one sentence getting you out of the story. So that's the structure I used. And within it, I salted in the human condition, which is what fascinates us all. And yet the action story was sufficient for those that didn't want to pay attention to the human condition. So that's it. That's what you can do too when you're creating a story. And this is true whether it's a business presentation or it's a flash fiction story or a novel or whatever type of story you want to share, maybe with your kids or at the campfire, whatever it might be. The same steps are always needed. That's it for this week. Have a great day. Whoops. Where's my button? Oh, there we are.